Hi, everyone. It's Terry Bruce, and these are your 10-minute nonprofit evaluation tips. Now, this month, we are talking about data analysis. We're talking about making meaning out of data and starting to weed through the tons of data you probably already have at your fingertips, but you're probably not using well. You're collecting participant counts and donor and volunteer hours and memberships and renewals and services provided, but it's just a lot of noise. And you're like, it's not telling me anything useful. So we're going to try to start building up your systems for making meaning out of your data and how to cut through the noise. And we're picking up where we left off last time. We've got the same data set. I literally have not made a single change since the last frame of the last video where we could see we were looking at our June and July class enrollments. And so we talked about a habit that I have found people have where they start putting their data like in different spreadsheets, right? Like their June enrollments in one spreadsheet, July, August in another one. And I said, that's really hard to tabulate, to then be able to do those comparisons. So sometimes people think they're being clever and they go, okay, well, I'm going to do this then instead. I'm going to list my various workshops, and then I'm just going to do a different column for the data for each month. And then we might do like a subtotal, right? Like, and we're going to do equals sum back to our good friend and boop and 64. And then we do boop. And we're like, haha, see, look, now it's really easy to see a trend. Like, oh, we had 64 people, then we had 70. Clearly, we served more people in July. Yes, you can do this. This is better than doing each month on its own spreadsheet. But again, it does get a little messy where you have to, you're then, you may come in and you're like, okay, I'm going to do my averages here as well. Interesting. Okay. Number. There we go. And so we are, oh, so if you caught this as well, right? I'm like, the average was 14 last time we talked about this. Why is it 18? Why is it 18? Because you'll notice that I consolidated, again, 4 values in each of these, right? I consolidated by topic. And so that changed the averages, because instead of computing, dividing by 5 values, we're dividing by 4 values because I consolidated when I went to this. And so that's the first thing that you need to look at is like, to be more accurate, I potentially should have, had beginner Excel 1, beginner Excel 2. But again, it depends on what I'm looking at. Am I looking at the average enrollment per class or the average enrollment per topic? Am I looking at the demand per topic, or am I looking at the actual date and time each class is held, or per teacher who's teaching each class, to try to correlate variables? So when you're setting up your spreadsheet, even if you're doing a consolidated spreadsheet like this, again, what question are you trying to answer? And is your data set up in a way to allow that analysis? And this is one of those things where you might have one spreadsheet set up one way where it's like, oh, the average is 13. And then you have another page in the report that you're giving to the board where it says your average is 16. And the board's like, well, is it 13 or is it 16? Which is it? And you're like, oh, sugar monkeys, I got to check. Why is that different? So you got to be really, really careful with that, consolidating data and rejiggering it in a different way. It's may give you a different number. Now, I like this more than the everything is on different spreadsheets and trying to add up all the different spreadsheets, but it's still gonna, in the long run, give you some challenges. What you really want is you want one nice data sheet where we don't have these formulas. Instead, what we do is we keep coming in and we just add rows to the bottom. So when the August data comes in, we would just put the August data here. We get to the September data, we'd put that below, and we just keep adding, and we just have this one big data sheet that's just data. Then if we wanted to do enrollments by month and those averages or the total per class, what we'd really want to do is we would want to do a pivot table, for instance. A pivot table will give you data that lays out like this, that's kind of this cross tabulation, but the system does it for you automatically, and you don't have to keep trying to make your spreadsheet fancy and readable. If you haven't used pivot tables before, you can definitely Google and learn about how to do those. You can do them in Google Sheets as well as Excel. Other places, they may be called like a cross-tab report or a matrix report. So you can do them in Microsoft Access and Salesforce and most data management systems. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead. It's selected my data range. I'm going to put it on the same spreadsheet. Sure, why not? I don't recommend that, but for illustrative purposes, we're going to put that right here in this spreadsheet. And we'll stick it right over here. Thank you. Okay. There we go. And then, all right, we are going to say, so our columns, we want to be our months, and we don't need the days. Thank you. We don't need the individual dates. We just want the months. And then our rows will be our workshop titles, and our values are going to be, now this one is a sum. Okie dokie. And then we're going to do a little formatting here to make this just a squidgy bit easier to read. Let's make you a little bigger. Here we go. Okay. And then we're going to put some grid lines in here because this is a little hard to read. Don't like it. Don't really like it. It's my borders. Oh, over here. Looking, there we go, borders. Okay, here we go. Woohoo. So now we can see that we had 64 people in June, we had 71 in July. If we had August, September, if we had more date, we could keep adding columns. We could add a filter. We could say we only want things to happen in 2023. So if we have one spreadsheet that has 5 years worth of data, we could apply filters to only show us the last 12 months of data, or we could, instead of grouping by month, we could group by year. Like, this is very powerful and it's super simple, and it's easier to do this than it is to mess around with your spreadsheet and try to get your spreadsheet laid out the way that you want it to make analysis easier, like visually. Because the simple fact of the matter is you're probably going to want one spreadsheet to answer a whole bunch of different questions for you, right? We may want to know, have we enrolled more people than previously? Is there a correlation between date time of when a class is held and enrollment numbers? Is there a correlation between who's teaching the class and enrollment numbers? How many times have we taught Excel versus how many times have we taught Word? When's the last time we offered an advanced Word class, right? Like, is it time to offer another one? Those are a bunch of different questions we probably want to answer. And so trying to set up our spreadsheet, in this case, it's set up to accommodate total and average enrollment per month, but it's not necessarily set up to tell us how many times we've offered a certain class or the last time we offered that class. I mean, maybe we can go, okay, beginner PowerPoint, last time we offered it was July, right? But if we had two different beginner PowerPoint classes, we don't have the specific dates in the spreadsheet, and we can't really put them into the spreadsheet in this format versus in this format, we at least have the discrete dates, and we could filter. I've applied a filter to this, and we could filter, and we could say, okay, when's the last time we offered any class? If these weren't in chronological order, which they are, or we could filter and we could say, okay, beginner Word, we have offered it twice, and the last time was July 12th. So this answers a question really easily for us, but you can see why you don't want to put the pivot table in this spreadsheet, because then you lose half your pivot table, right? So setting up the spreadsheet for visually analyzing data or answering particular questions may make it harder to answer other questions. And that's why setting it up as just a continuous data sheet with all the data, and then you can use filters, and you can then put pivot tables and charts and graphs into other tables, other tabs within that workbook, make it much better and much easier to be able to filter things. Now, additionally, if we come over here, click in our pivot table, this is the sum, the total number of people per class. But we could also change this. So we could come over and we could do an average. So now we can see the average number of people per class. And again, we may want to format our numbers. Sorry, my little things are, let's see, that number format. Currency, it's not currency, it's a number. There we go, 0 decimal points. Okay. And then one thing I don't like about Excel is every time it keeps wanting to resize my columns. Just leave my columns where I left them in Excel, please. Google doesn't do that to me. One word about Google Sheets versus Excel. Google Sheets is pretty good, but it actually is lacking quite a few tools, analysis tools, and the ability to fully customize layouts the way that you want, especially charts and graphs. I find to be extremely weak in Google Sheets versus Microsoft Excel. When you can use Excel, use Excel. And there's a bunch of things I could say about that, but we're out of time for this week, so I can't go into that. But certainly, if you want a more in-depth answer to that, you can email me or post a comment, and I'm happy to speak about some of those distinctions and differences. Anyway, so here's our average. So here we can see, oh, good, our average is going up. Woohoo. And we can kind of see what's going on with the numbers. Now, the last thing I want to say about this month is you notice how the picture is changing. We had 1 month worth of data and it told us one thing. Then we got information. We had 2 data points. We had our enrollments for June and our enrollments for July. And the picture starts to change a little bit. The more data we can add to this data set, the more comparison points, the more accurate, the greater the sample size or the data set. So keep that in mind as well, that when you're doing analysis and you go to draw conclusions from a very small sample size or from one point in time or one comparison point, it's a very limited view. And getting more data, a larger sample size or data set, or getting 2 or more comparison points always increases the accuracy of what's going on. And gives you a longer term view. So that is kind of the gold standard of what you want to aim for. And this goes back to one of my earlier points in one of the previous months where I said, you know, hiring a consultant to come in and grab data once gives you a snapshot in time that becomes outdated and pretty useless really quickly because it doesn't allow for comparison. What you want to aim for with your evaluation ecosystem is to have a continuous flow of data that you are continuously getting. Real-time reporting and ability to analyze your numbers so that you can have that changing view and have those comparison points. Because if you don't, you're kind of flying blind. So keep that in mind, that the gold standard and what you're aiming for here is to figure out how to not grab data once and analyze it once, but to have data at your fingertips continuously and continuously be analyzing and looking at it. All right, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week, continuing on this vein with a few more statistical concepts and ways to analyze your data. As always, if you have any questions or need some additional assistance, feel free to leave me a comment on the Substack or email me at terrybruce@gmail.com.